What should have been a routine, uneventful flight from Ahmedabad to London spiraled into a nightmare in less than 5 minutes. Air India flight AI-117, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner carrying 242 passengers and crew, crashed during takeoff on the morning of June 12, 2025. But this wasn't just a crash. It was a disaster that tore through lives, sparked international outrage, and raised serious questions about safety, negligence, and accountability. Within moments of lifting off the ground, the aircraft veered sharply off course and slammed into a residential hostel for young doctors located disturbingly close to the runway. Flames erupted, metal screeched against concrete, and black smoke painted the sky. For dozens watching nearby, it was an apocalyptic scene. The footage was all over the internet within minutes. You didn't need to be at the airport to feel the panic. Clips showed the Dreamliner's tail sticking grotesquely out of a partially collapsed building. Flames devoured both the fuselage and parts of the hostel. Sirens blared, people screamed, and first responders fought their way through the wreckage with desperation on their faces. According to one eyewitness, the sound of the explosion was so loud it shattered windows several blocks away. They thought a bomb had gone off, and in some ways, it might as well have. The impact wasn't just physical, it tore through the collective sense of safety in Indian aviation. Early reports confirmed over 200 feared dead, with only a handful of people rushed to nearby hospitals in critical condition. Air India's CEO claimed that some passengers survived long enough to be treated, but conflicting reports from the police commissioner stated that there were likely no survivors at all. Confusion, chaos, grief. These were the only things that spread faster than the fire. But there was something even darker lurking behind this. The hostel the plane crashed into wasn't just a random building, it was housing medical students, young professionals on the front lines of India's healthcare system. According to the Indian Medical Association, at least 4 students who were supposed to be inside are still missing. Their names haven't been released yet, but friends and classmates began posting tributes and photos online, desperately hoping for a miracle that may never come. As for the aircraft itself, this was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, one of the most sophisticated commercial airliners in the world. It's the kind of plane that's supposed to represent the future of air travel. So how does something like this happen? According to Flight Radar 24, everything appeared normal until a sudden nosedive just seconds after liftoff. The data shows erratic climbing patterns, followed by an abrupt drop in altitude. Boeing released a brief statement saying they were ready to support Air India, but that's corporate speak for we're watching this very closely because it could become a PR disaster. And maybe they should be worried, because this wasn't just a freak accident. It was the first major incident involving a Boeing 787-8 in recent history, which, for an aircraft touted as one of the safest and most efficient, is a red flag big enough to ground fleets. It's not just Boeing under the spotlight, it's also Air India. Because this crash is just the latest in a string of mishaps, close calls, and outright disasters that have plagued the airline over the years. Back in 2010, an Air India Express flight overshot the runway in Mangalore, killing 158 people. In 2020, another flight skidded off the runway during bad weather in Kozhikode, killing 21. And even though Air India has tried to modernize its fleet and improve its safety protocols, critics have argued that bureaucracy, cost-cutting, and poor oversight still haunt the airline. This crash is going to bring all of that back into the spotlight, and this time, it's global. But here's where things start getting really messy. Not everyone is buying the official story. Social media is exploding with speculation. Some claiming that the flight was sabotaged. Others point to maintenance issues that were allegedly ignored. A few people even claim that the plane was doomed from the start, referencing whispers of internal emails warning about a possible mechanical flaw in that particular aircraft. Of course, none of this has been confirmed, but the theories are spreading fast and Air India's silence is only feeding the flames. There's also the uncomfortable question: why was a residential building that housed students allowed to exist so close to the airport's active runway? Aviation safety experts have long criticized Indian airport authorities for poor zoning and inadequate safety buffers, and this incident proves them right in the worst way possible. It wasn't just a plane crash. It was an accident waiting to happen, engineered by years of neglect, denial, and misplaced priorities. And then there's the international angle. The crash has triggered global headlines, not just because of the scale, but because the destination was London. Several British nationals were reportedly on board. The UK Foreign Office has already issued a statement expressing condolences and promising to work closely with Indian authorities. But behind closed doors, pressure is mounting. Families are demanding answers. Lawmakers are calling for independent investigations. And Air India is finding itself backed into a corner. The protests began just hours after the crash, not just in India, but in major cities around the world. In Seattle, a demonstration initially organized to protest immigration policies quickly shifted focus, with attendees holding signs about Air India, aviation negligence, and corporate accountability. In London, relatives of passengers held a vigil outside the Indian embassy, demanding transparency and justice. Hashtags like Shwa Air India crash and Ye Ahmedabad disaster began trending on Twitter and Instagram, and within 24 hours, the world was watching. But even as rescue teams sifted through the wreckage, trying to identify charred remains and account for the missing, questions kept piling up. One aviation expert noted that the Dreamliner's fuel load and thrust-to-weight ratio should have made a crash during takeoff almost impossible unless there was a critical failure. Another said the angle of the descent suggested a possible engine stall. But here's the twist. Neither Boeing nor Air India has released the black box data yet, and every hour they delay, suspicion grows. In the meantime, local media has started reporting that airport personnel were instructed not to speak to journalists. A whistleblower posted anonymously claiming there had been a serious radar malfunction at the airport just days before the crash. Again, unverified. But in the absence of clear answers, speculation becomes the default narrative. It's also worth noting that this crash has revived memories of older controversies surrounding both Air India and the Indian Directorate General of Civil Aviation. In 2018, a leaked audit revealed that several Air India aircraft were operating with expired maintenance logs. At the time, the airline promised reforms, but 5 years later, how many of those promises were actually kept? Families of victims are already organizing lawsuits. Multiple class actions are being discussed, and international law firms have stepped in, offering to represent the grieving relatives. The compensation Air India is offering, just under $100,000 per passenger. For many, that feels insulting. No amount of money can bring my daughter back, one grieving father told reporters. But the least they can do is be honest with us. Meanwhile, in the medical community, grief has turned into anger. Several doctors' unions are now demanding answers from the government about the safety of the hostel that was destroyed. How could it be placed so dangerously close to a flight path? Were there no regulations, no buffer zones? The head of one medical council stated, "We train students to save lives. Now they've died because of someone else's incompetence." And while all of this unfolds, Boeing is quietly conducting its own internal probe. Sources say the company has flown in specialists from the US to analyze flight data and inspect the wreckage. One insider mentioned off-record that the incident is more serious than initially believed. That phrase alone is enough to keep conspiracy theories alive for weeks. Still, in the midst of all this chaos, people are trying to piece together the human side of the tragedy. Videos have surfaced of passengers boarding the plane just hours before the crash, smiling, talking, texting loved ones. A newlywed couple returning from their honeymoon, a group of high school students on a study trip, a renowned cardiac surgeon flying to a medical conference, all gone in an instant. Funerals are already being planned. Some bodies were burned beyond recognition. Others are still missing, trapped beneath the rubble of a building that should have never been near an airport in the first place. Survivors from the hostel, the few who made it out, are dealing with burns, trauma, and the horror of watching their friends die before their eyes. The Indian government has promised a full investigation. Prime Minister Modi called the incident a national tragedy and vowed that those responsible will be held accountable. But for many, those words ring hollow. Because this isn't just about a crash, it's about a system that failed, again. And this time, the cost was measured in hundreds of lives. As for Air India, their reputation has taken a brutal hit. They've suspended all 787 flights for the next 48 hours pending safety checks. But experts say that may not be enough. Public trust has been shattered. Flyers are already cancelling tickets. And with lawsuits incoming and international pressure mounting, the airline is staring down the barrel of what could be the biggest crisis in its history. So now the world waits for answers, for justice, for the black box to speak. But for the families who lost everything, no explanation will ever be enough. No amount of data will rewrite what happened in those final moments. What started as an ordinary flight became a nightmare the moment the wheels left the runway. And for 242 people, passengers, crew, and students on the ground, it became their final journey. But the story doesn't end here. Because if the findings reveal negligence, if this crash was preventable, if those whispers of ignored warnings turn out to be true, then this isn't just a tragedy, it's a crime, and someone will have to answer for it.